Carl Jung discovered why only broken empaths awaken their true power after the darkness. And it's not because suffering is sacred, it's because breaking forces what Jung called the integration crisis, the exact psychological threshold where empathy transforms from self-destruction into strategic capability. In 1919, Jung treated a woman, we'll call her Marta, who'd spent 12 years absorbing everyone's emotional pain until her body simply stopped functioning. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't leave her room. She told Jung, "I've given everything to help others, and now there's nothing left of me." Jung recognized something she couldn't see. Her collapse wasn't failure. It was her psyche's desperate attempt to force integration. She wasn't broken beyond repair. She was breaking through to a completely different way of being an empath. If you've experienced emotional collapse after years of overgiving, you're not witnessing your destruction. You're at the exact threshold where true power becomes possible, but only if you understand the 3 stages Jung documented and why most empaths never complete them. The first stage reveals why your breaking point was actually necessary. When Marta first came to Jung's practice in January 1919, she described what many empaths experience, but few can articulate. "I don't know where I end and others begin anymore. I feel their sadness as my sadness, their anxiety as my anxiety, their pain as my pain. And now I can't feel anything at all." For 12 years, Marta had worked as a nurse during World War I and its aftermath. She'd held dying soldiers, comforted grieving families, absorbed the trauma of an entire generation. Her empathy had no boundaries, no off switch, no filter. Then at age 34, her body staged a rebellion. Chronic exhaustion so severe she couldn't stand. Migraines that lasted weeks. A complete inability to feel emotions, not just others' emotions, but her own. Her doctor found nothing physically wrong and sent her to Jung with a diagnosis of nervous exhaustion. But Jung immediately recognized what was actually happening. Marta's psyche was forcing the threshold moment, when unintegrated empathy collapses under its own weight. This is the breaking point every empath faces, the moment when your capacity to feel others overwhelms your capacity to function. And Jung discovered something crucial. This breaking point isn't random. It follows a specific pattern, happens at a predictable threshold, and serves a necessary psychological function. Modern neuroscience now explains what Jung observed clinically. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive people shows that empaths have heightened activity in mirror neuron systems, the brain networks, that allow us to experience others' emotions as our own. But here's what makes empathic breaking dangerous. Dr. Tanya Singer's research on compassion fatigue reveals that sustained empathic engagement without proper boundaries causes measurable changes in brain structure. The regions responsible for emotional regulation actually shrink, while pain-processing regions become hyperactive. You're not just feeling too much. Your brain is literally restructuring itself around endless absorption, and eventually, it can't sustain the load. Marta's collapse wasn't weakness. It was her nervous system's emergency shutdown to prevent complete psychological fragmentation. Her breaking point was actually a survival mechanism. Jung told her something that changed everything. You haven't lost your gift. Your psyche is demanding you learn to use it differently. Right now, your empathy consumes you. The breaking is forcing you to transform it into something you can control. This is why only broken empaths awaken true power. Not because breaking is magical, but because breaking forces the crisis that unbroken empaths never face. Without breaking, you remain in automatic absorption, feeling endlessly without awareness or choice. The breaking shatters that automaticity. It forces you to ask, if I can't absorb everyone's pain anymore, who am I? If my empathy isn't limitless, What is it? If you've experienced complete collapse after years of absorbing others' emotions, comment, "I'm at the breaking point." Because recognizing you're at this threshold, not past it, not beyond it, but exactly at it, determines whether you stay shattered or undergo the transformation Jung documented in 3 distinct stages. Jung observed that every empath who successfully transformed from broken to integrated moved through 3 predictable stages. Understanding which stage you're in determines whether you complete the integration or remain trapped in the breaking. Week 1. Marta sat across from Jung, hands trembling. "I can't feel anything. My friend came to me yesterday, crying about her divorce. I used to absorb her pain instantly. Now it's like there's glass between us. Have I lost my gift? Am I broken permanently?" This is empathic numbing, when your capacity shuts down completely as self-protection. For 6 weeks, Marta experienced complete emotional flatlining. She couldn't feel others' emotions. She couldn't feel her own. Nothing. This terrified her more than the collapse itself. She'd spent her entire life defined by her ability to feel others' emotions. When that capacity vanished, she lost her sense of identity, her sense of purpose, her sense of worth. But Jung understood something Marta couldn't see yet. The shattering wasn't destruction of her empathy, it was her psyche forcibly, creating space between self and other. For 12 years, she'd been psychologically fused with everyone around her. The shattering was differentiation happening at the level beneath consciousness. Florence Nightingale experienced this exact pattern. After returning from the Crimean War, where she'd absorbed the suffering of thousands of wounded soldiers, her letters describe complete emotional paralysis. She wrote, "I can no longer feel as I once did. The anguish of others, which once moved me so powerfully, now seems distant, as though I observe it through fog." She hadn't become heartless. Her psyche was forcing the same crisis Marta faced, creating the psychological space necessary for the next stage. During this first stage, empaths make a critical error. They try to force their empathy back into operation. They push themselves into situations that used to trigger empathic response, desperate to feel, again, terrified they've lost their gift forever. But the shattering serves a purpose. It's not permanent, it's preparatory. Your psyche is clearing space for a completely different relationship with empathy. Jung told Marta in week 8, "The gift hasn't vanished. It's dormant while your psyche rebuilds the container to hold it. If you force it back too soon, you'll simply repeat the collapse." Studies on compassion fatigue confirm this. Attempting to return to the same patterns without integration leads to faster, more severe subsequent collapses. The shattering stage typically lasts 4 to 12 weeks. You cannot rush it. Trying to force empathy back online before the integration work is complete guarantees you remain broken rather than becoming whole. One man wrote during his own psychological crisis, "I discover I am not only the healer, but also the one who secretly longs to wound. I have pretended to be only light, but darkness lives in me as well, and it demands recognition." The man was Carl Jung himself. During his break with Freud and his subsequent crisis from 1913-1916, Jung faced exactly what Marta would face 8 years later, the shadow beneath the compassion. He'd built an identity around being the empathic analyst who understood everyone. But beneath that compassion lived something he'd been repressing: ambition, need for recognition, resentment at playing second to Freud, rage at being misunderstood. When he finally acknowledged these parts, he wrote in his journal, "To see clearly is to see one's own ugliness alongside one's beauty. I am both healer and destroyer. Accepting this nearly destroys me, yet it is the only path to wholeness." Week 8. Marta's session with Jung. She'd been calm for weeks, too calm. Then suddenly, "I gave everything." Her voice shook with rage Jung had never heard from her. I sacrificed my health, my relationships, my entire life to help others, and none of them appreciated it. None of them even noticed. I was their emotional servant, and they used me until I broke. There it was, the shadow beneath 12 years of selfless compassion. For 12 years, Marta had told herself she helped others out of pure love. But beneath that love lived something darker, a desperate need to be needed, a compulsion to rescue that kept her from facing her own pain, a codependency disguised as selflessness. What looks like endless compassion is often bargaining. If I carry everyone's pain, maybe I won't have to face my own. If I'm always needed, I'll never be abandoned. If I'm the healer, I don't have to admit I'm wounded. The martyr complex, the hidden engine driving most empathic collapse. You're not just absorbing others' emotions, you're using that absorption to avoid your own shadow, your rage, your needs, your wounds, your hunger for validation. The shadow encounter forces you to see this, and it's brutal. Marta had to confront that her 12 years of selfless service weren't entirely selfless. She'd been collecting debts. Look how much I sacrifice for you. You owe me love, appreciation, loyalty. When those debts weren't paid, resentment accumulated. But she couldn't acknowledge resentment because it contradicted her identity as the compassionate one. So the resentment went underground, festering, until her psyche couldn't hold the contradiction anymore and staged the collapse. Jung pushed her. You cannot heal others while fleeing from yourself. Your empathy has been your escape. Now you must turn it inward. Because empaths use absorption to avoid their shadow. Therefore, the breaking forces them to finally confront what they've been running from. Month 5. Marta sat with a friend who was grieving, felt the friend's sadness, and then let it go. She told Jung, I could feel her pain. I understood it, but I didn't absorb it. For the first time in my life, I was present with suffering without becoming it. Month 6. She learned to ask, whose emotion is this? When anxiety arose, she'd pause. Is this mine, or am I picking up someone else's state? Month 7. She established what Jung called perceptual gears, empathy hours from 10 a.m., 12 p.m. and 3 p.m., 5 p.m. for deep engagement, recovery periods where she consciously closed the channel. Month 8. She began training as a psychotherapist under Jung's supervision. Month 9. First client session. She felt his trauma, childhood abandonment, decades of shame. She understood it deeply. Then she left the office and went to dinner with friends. The pain didn't follow her home. Month 10. Weekly meetings with 3 other former nurses. All collapsed, all now integrating. They practiced reciprocal witness. 1 week Marta would share what she was feeling. The group would help her differentiate. That's yours. That's absorbed. That's shadow. Next week, she'd witness while another member processed. Month 12. Marta told Jung, I still feel deeply, but now I choose what to feel, when to feel it, and how to transform it into service without self-destruction. Research on sustainable helping confirms this pattern. Helpers who maintain clear boundaries between self and other experience less burnout and provide more effective support than those who over-identify with others. Suffering. The integration stage reveals the truth. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. Empathy with boundaries is power. If you're learning to feel with others without drowning, comment, I'm choosing integration. Because completing these 3 stages transforms you from automatic absorption to deliberate capacity. But most empaths never complete the journey, and understanding why reveals the most dangerous traps. Jung observed that approximately 70% of empaths who reached the breaking point never completed integration. They remained shattered, some for years, some for life. Understanding why prevents you from becoming part of that statistic. Month 6. Marta's greatest resistance emerged when Jung suggested she practice closing her empathic channel. "But if I'm not absorbing others' emotions," she protested, "who am I? My empathy defines me. Without it, I'm nothing." Identity fusion, when you merge empathic capacity with your entire sense of self. You don't say, "I have empathic abilities." You say, "I am an empath," as though empathy is your essence, rather than one capacity among many. When empathy becomes identity, integration feels like death. If you learn to turn empathy off, you lose yourself. Better to stay broken and retain your identity than to become whole and face the void of not knowing who you are. Jung spent weeks helping Marta differentiate. You are not your empathy. You are a whole person who possesses empathic capacity. Empathy is something you have, not something you are. This distinction is critical. I am an empath makes you one-dimensional. I have empathic capacity makes you multifaceted, a person who can choose when and how to engage that capacity. Sylvia Plath's letters reveal this trap. I feel too much, and that is my illness and my gift. Without this feeling, I am not Sylvia. When empathic absorption became unbearable, she couldn't imagine turning it off, because turning it off felt like erasing herself. Because empaths fuse capacity with identity, therefore they choose staying broken over transformation that feels like self-annihilation. Around month 6, Marta began reading mystical literature about wounded healers and sacred suffering. She came to Jung excited. My breaking was my initiation. My wound is my power. I shouldn't try to heal it. I should honor it. Jung recognized the danger immediately. Your wound is not sacred. It's a wound, and wounds need healing, not worship. You can honor what the wound taught you while still closing it. Spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid psychological integration. You're terrified of doing the hard integration work, so you reframe staying broken as spiritual achievement. You tell yourself that your pain connects you to something divine, that your woundedness makes you more compassionate, that healing would make you less sensitive. But this is defense mechanism disguised as spirituality. Marta had to confront, am I honoring my wound, or am I using honor as an excuse to avoid the painful work of integration? The difference. Honoring your wound means acknowledging what it taught you while actively healing. Worshipping your wound means keeping it open indefinitely and calling that wisdom. Research on post-traumatic growth versus chronic trauma identity shows this clearly. People who integrate trauma experience actual growth. People who identify as their trauma remain stuck, calling their stuckness depth. Jung told Marta about another patient, a man we'll call Heinrich, who never made the distinctions she was learning. Heinrich came to Jung in 1915 at age 40, experiencing the same empathic collapse Marta would face 4 years later. He'd spent 20 years as what he called a wounded healer, absorbing others' trauma, never setting boundaries, always available, always sacrificing. Heinrich completed stage 1. The shattering happened. He experienced the empathic numbing, the terror of losing his gift. He even glimpsed stage 2. During one session, rage emerged. He admitted, I resent them, all of them, for taking and never giving. But then, Heinrich fell into all 3 traps simultaneously. He fused his identity completely with being the wounded healer. When Jung suggested he could help others without staying wounded, Heinrich resisted. But this is who I am. The wound is my essence. He began reading mystical texts that romanticized suffering. He told Jung, my suffering is my spiritual gift. To heal would be to lose my connection to the sacred. And he returned to compulsive rescuing, calling it compassion. When Jung pointed out he was recreating the exact patterns that caused his collapse, Heinrich said, I must help them. It's my calling. He never completed integration. He never learned to turn empathy on and off. He never established boundaries. For the next 20 years, Heinrich continued absorbing others' pain, breaking periodically, then returning to the same patterns. He told himself he was honoring his wound and living his sacred calling. At age 60, Heinrich died bitter and alone. His compassion had driven everyone away because it wasn't compassion. It was control disguised as care. People felt his unspoken demand that they remain wounded so he could keep rescuing them. His wound never became power, it became prison. Jung told Marta this story as a warning. You can choose Heinrich's path, staying broken, calling it sacred, dying isolated, or you can complete the integration and discover what empathy becomes when you're whole. If you're recognizing these patterns in yourself, comment, I see the traps. Because avoiding these 3 traps requires following the specific integration technique Jung developed, the method that transforms breaking from destruction into true power. Jung's 4-step integration process transforms automatic empathy into strategic empathy, the ability to feel with others consciously, selectively, and sustainably. The foundation of integration is answering one question: whose emotion is this? Jung had Marta practice this daily. Morning. Sit quietly and identify your baseline emotional state before engaging with anyone. Right now, I feel calm, slightly anxious about today's tasks, hopeful about the week ahead. Throughout the day, when emotion arises, pause and ask, is this mine? Was I feeling this 5 minutes ago? Or did this appear after interacting with someone? Evening. Journal the distinction. Today I absorbed my colleague's anxiety during our meeting. I carried it for 3 hours before recognizing it wasn't mine. Then I released it. This simple practice creates the differentiation that automatic empathy lacks. Within 6 weeks, Marta could identify in real time when she was absorbing versus when she was feeling her own emotions. The key insight: most empaths go through life never questioning whether the emotions they feel are actually theirs. Differentiation practice shatters that fusion. Jung pushed Marta to acknowledge the aspects of herself she'd been repressing through endless empathy. What do you want to say that you're not saying? Who do you resent? What would you do if you weren't trying to be good? What part of you is exhausted by caring? Marta discovered a part of herself that wanted to scream. Stop asking me to carry your pain. I'm tired. I want to be selfish. I want someone to take care of me for once. This was her shadow, the rejected aspects she'd been suppressing through her compassionate persona. Jung taught her, these parts are not evil. They're your wholeness demanding integration. You can be empathic and have limits. You can care and say no. You can help and prioritize yourself. Shadow integration meant practicing behaviors that felt selfish. Saying I'm not available without explanation. Letting someone sit with their pain without rescuing them. Prioritizing her own needs over others' demands. Feeling rage without guilt. Each practice expanded her capacity to be whole rather than just good. Month 8. Marta began practicing strategic empathy, deliberately choosing when to engage her empathic capacity. She established empathy hours, 10 a.m., 12 p.m., and 3 p.m., 5 p.m. for client work with full empathic engagement. Recovery periods, 12 p.m., 3 p.m., and after 5 p.m., consciously closing the channel. If someone genuinely needed support outside those hours, she could engage briefly, then immediately return to recovery mode. This structure prevented the endless bleeding that had led to her collapse. Empathy became a tool she wielded, not a wound that constantly leaked. Month 9. Jung connected Marta with 3 other former nurses, all collapsed during the war, all now training as therapists. They met weekly to practice reciprocal witness. One week, Marta would share what she was feeling, and the group would help her differentiate signal from noise. Next week, she'd witness while another member processed. This community provided something crucial: calibration. You cannot integrate empathy in isolation. You need others who understand the work to mirror back what you can't see yourself. Month 10. The weekly meetings became her anchor. The 3 other women understood her in ways no one else could. They'd all been through the breaking, all faced their shadows, all were learning strategic engagement. Month 11. Marta's first solo client session. A young woman, 23, trauma survivor. Marta felt the woman's pain, childhood abuse, decades of shame. She understood it deeply. Then the session ended. Marta went to dinner with friends. The pain didn't follow her home. Month 12. She told Jung, "I still feel deeply, but now I choose what to feel, when to feel it, and how to transform it into service without self-destruction." If you're ready to practice strategic empathy instead of automatic absorption, comment, "I'm learning the technique." But understanding the technique is only half the transformation. The final integration requires grasping why true power comes from wholeness, not from staying wounded. Year 2, Spring 1921. Marta returned to Jung for what would be their final formal session. She described her life now. "I work with trauma survivors 4 days a week. I feel their pain. I understand it deeply, but I don't absorb it anymore. I can sit with someone's suicidal ideation, hold space for their darkest moments, and then leave my office and enjoy dinner with friends. I have boundaries now. I say no without guilt. I prioritize my needs without shame. And paradoxically, my work is more effective because I'm helping from wholeness, not from my own woundedness. My empathy isn't unlimited anymore. It's strategic, and that makes it sustainable." This is the integrated empath, someone who has transformed automatic absorption into deliberate capacity. The power isn't in the breaking, it's in the integration that follows. Jung recognized what Marta had achieved. You are no longer an empath in the automatic sense, defined by endless absorption. You are a whole person who possesses empathic capacity and chooses when to engage it. That is true power. The critical reframe. Your breaking point wasn't your power awakening. It was your psyche demanding integration. Your wound isn't sacred. It's a teacher. Honor what it taught you, then close it. True power doesn't come from staying broken. It comes from becoming whole. The true power empaths awaken after darkness isn't mystical. It's psychological. It's the power of differentiation, knowing where you end and others begin. Boundaries, choosing what you absorb and what you release. Shadow integration, being whole, not just good. Strategic capacity, empathy as tool, not wound. Sustainable service, helping from strength, not depletion. Carl Jung himself completed this exact transformation. After his crisis from 1913-1916, where his own empathic absorption nearly destroyed him, he spent the rest of his life teaching integration. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were wounded to be, but who you choose to become through deliberate integration." Modern research confirms the transformation is real. Dr. Richard Davidson's work on contemplative neuroscience shows that trained practitioners can engage empathy deliberately and disengage it consciously, a skill that prevents compassion fatigue while maintaining caring capacity. The final truth: only broken empaths awaken true power, not because breaking is magical, but because breaking forces the crisis that automatic empaths never face. If you haven't broken yet, you're still operating in compulsive absorption. You might feel more than others, but you're not wielding your capacity. You're drowning in it. If you've broken and stayed broken, you've completed stage 1 but stopped. You're defining yourself by your wound rather than integrating it. If you've broken and integrated, you've discovered what Jung knew. Empathy is not who you are. It's a capacity you possess, and deliberate capacity is power. Marta's final words to Jung: I used to think my gift was feeling everything. Now I know my gift is choosing what to feel, when to feel it, and how to transform it into service without self-destruction. The breaking didn't give me power, integration did. That's not mysticism, that's psychology, and it's available to every empath willing to do the work. The question isn't whether you'll break. If you're a true empath, you will. The question is, will you integrate? Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.